Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good. And well, this morning I'll be talking about the Samanyapala Sutta, which is the second discourse of the long discourses of the Buddha. And it is a really wonderful and fairly essential starting point in the canon for um, any real interested practice. It's one of the first discourse when the Buddha actually explains his entire path of practice. And he does it quite wonderfully, explaining the fruits of this practice, the fruits of his teaching. And of course, this is a long sutta, and it is abridged here, so that it can be briefly talked about. So I hope you enjoy this, and I will try to. It's a longer sutta, so I will try to be diligent in the reading. So here it begins with the setting is that this is the Uposatha, and King Ajatasattu wants to hear. This is on this observance day. He wants to hear, get advice from spiritual master. At this time, this was very common, and so he goes with his ministers to see the Buddha to make a shorter introduction, and he goes and asks this question, which he asks to quite a few people, spiritual masters of this time. What are the fruits of this monastic life, or this for everybody? This is simply what are the fruits of this practice, really? Why would somebody go forth and dedicate their whole life to this? But this is also the fruits of anybody that would practice this path, in fact. And so here he goes. Dear Bhante, there are various professions and crafts, such as chefs, barbers, and soap makers, cooks, gardeners, and dyers, weavers, reed workers, and potters, translators and accountants, and all those with similar professions and skills. They live by the visible fruits of their professions. They themselves happily enjoy this. Their mothers and fathers happily enjoy this. Their children and wives happily enjoy this. Their friends and relatives happily enjoy this. They can thereby support the spiritual life and offer to wandering seekers and Brahmins. They stand in what is divine, in what has a happy result, in what is conducive to the celestial abodes. Bhante, is it possible to reveal any visible fruits of the truth-seeking life? Now he's asking, why would anybody leave everything behind, which is already, if it is done right, which is already heavenly, and dedicate their whole life to the Buddha's teaching, for example? It is possible, great king. Listen carefully and apply your mind to what I will say. Yes, Bhante, replied the king. The awakened one said this. Great king, a truth finder arises in the world, an arahant, perfectly all awakened, endowed with righteous knowledge and righteous behavior. See, the Buddha was very well known to practice what he taught, and that was one of his qualities. a blissful one, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed guide for those who seek peace, teacher of devas and humans, awakened and exalted. He teaches the Dhamma, which is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the ending. This is how the Buddha's teaching was known to be, and still is. In the meaning and the phrasing, he embodies and shines forth the completely perfected and utterly pure spiritual life. Then this Dhamma is heard by someone reborn in any family or country. Having heard this Dhamma, that person acquires faith in the Buddha. And then one takes on the training. Here I'm abridging a little bit because this is directed to monastic life particularly, but I am organizing it in a way that it can be more general for everybody. So I'm abridging a bit of the sutta here. One lives self-mastered and protected by the patimokkha. And this is one of the wonderful things that is about virtue, is that virtue is not only these restrictions that we put into ourselves, it is an actual protection and also a beautiful aid on the path for ourselves. Continually living in righteous behavior, seeing danger in the smallest lapse of attention, undertaking the training in the virtues, skillfully conducted in physical and verbal actions, completely pure in living and good in nature, watchful over the doors of one's sense faculties, possessed of presence and full awareness, happy and content. And the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha often began the explanation of his path by the acquiring of faith, and faith is very important in this practice. Not the kind of blind faith, but we can see it in everything that we do, in fact. We need faith, we need to believe in what we're doing, otherwise we wouldn't be doing anything. And so this is, now we don't have the Buddha around, so we don't have this gaining faith in the Buddha necessarily right away, but sometimes we'll hear of a friend that goes to a retreat and all the benefits that were reaped from that. And then we enroll or we go try a first retreat or something. And this is that same acquiring of faith here. And then later on we learn, oh, this was from the Buddha or something like that. And though it is not directly mentioned here, this is an exposition of the Eightfold Path, and now we are beginning the virtue. And how is a seeker good in nature? One abandons hurting living beings. One turns away from hurting living beings. With neither stick nor sword, one lives considerate and kind, friendly and compassionate towards all living beings. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons the taking of what is not given. One turns away from taking what is not given, taking only what is offered, expecting only what is offered. One lives without stealing, with inner purity. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons sexual misbehavior. One lives content and at peace, not obsessed by physical attraction. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons speaking lies. One turns away from speaking lies. One is known to speak the truth, filled with the truth, firm and trustworthy, not a deceiver of the world. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons hurtful speech. One turns away from hurtful speech. One does not repeat elsewhere what one has heard here in order to divide the people here. One does not repeat here what one has heard elsewhere in order to divide the people elsewhere. One is a unifier of those who are divided, a promoter of those who are united. One enjoys harmony, delights in harmony, rejoices in harmony. One speaks praise of making peace and harmony. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons coarse speech, one turns away from coarse speech, speaking with words that are polished, pleasant to hear, loving, going to the heart and civilized, beloved and dear to many. Such are the words that one speaks. This constitutes one's good nature. One abandons meaningless talk, one turns away from meaningless talk. One is a speaker of words that are timely, factual, and meaningful, a speaker of Dhamma, a speaker of Vinaya. This is the virtue of the monks, just virtue and good conduct in general. One speaks for the purpose of laying down the burden. Words that are appropriate, reasoned, well-defined, in connection with the meaning. This constitutes one's good nature. One turns away from enduring the seed kingdom and the plant kingdom. And these here are a couple that are more related to the monks, and the long list of virtue here goes on for quite a long time, but it is abridged here because it goes into more monastic details and not perhaps most relevant for all of us now. And here's a very wonderful part about the virtue, kind of summarizing it. In this way, great king, for a seeker of a good nature, there is no fear arising from anywhere, since one is protected by his own virtue. Just as for a highly celebrated king of the ruling caste, who has conquered his enemies in the four directions, there is no fear arising from anywhere, and he lives protected by his conquest. In the same way, for the good-natured seeker, there is no fear arising from anywhere, because one is protected by one's own virtue. Following this entire body of Aryan virtuous behavior, one experiences within himself or oneself a completely blameless happiness, and that's very important to understand. In this way, great king, a seeker is of the good nature. And now we begin the fold of meditation, which is not completely different from the first fold of virtue, but speaking of wise practice and wise awareness, or what is usually translated as right effort and right mindfulness and right collectedness or concentration. How is a seeker a gatekeeper of one's sense faculties? Seeing a shape with the eye, one does not dwell on it with one's mind, nor does one dwell on any of its features. If one were to dwell with the visual faculty unprotected, longing, impatience, and unskillful, unwholesome states would take over one's mind. Thus one practices for its mastery. One protects the visual faculty. One becomes skilled regarding the visual faculty. Hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, and touching a tangible with the body, and being aware of a mental state with the mind or any mental objects in the mind. One does not dwell on it with one's mind, nor does one dwell on any of its features. If one were to live with the mind faculty unprotected, longing, impatience, and unskillful, unwholesome states would take over one's mind. Thus one practices for its mastery, one protects the mental faculty, one becomes skilled regarding the mental faculty. And this being the first of the fourfold right effort. And this is to protect the mind and protect ourselves from unwholesome states, the potential for unwholesome states to arise. And here the Buddha had a few ways of explaining it. He either talked about the four satipatthanas, the four resting places of awareness, or often he would use this sequence of each of the sense faculty, because when these unskillful, unwholesome states arise, they arise dependent in condition on any of these six sense faculties. It can also be explained with the four foundations of mindfulness, but it works in the same way. Whatever happens arises dependent upon these grounds. We either have something unpleasant happening at the eye faculty, or something that we really want at the touch faculty, or something like that. And then based upon that, there is clinging around these states that are either pleasant or unpleasant, either wanting it more or pushing it away, and propagating or proliferating about it. And tension builds up, and this is when we use the 6 R's, or simply relax and let go and smile and come back to whatever your meditation object is. And right effort and right awareness, or wise or harmonious, however whichever word you want to use for it, they come together. They are very closely intertwined, because by way of wise practice or wise effort, wise awareness arises, and this wise awareness is directly usable it's available for our faculty of discernment, and discerning the tension, discerning unwholesome states as they arise. And possessing this awakened self-mastery, one experiences within oneself a happiness that is completely blameless. This is how a seeker is a gatekeeper of one's own sense faculties. How is a seeker present and fully aware? One is fully conscious while going forward and coming back. One is fully conscious looking ahead and looking down, while moving and extending one's body, wearing the sangati. That's the third robe of the monks. That means putting on your sweater if you're not in a monastic context or something like that. One's bowl and robes, while eating, drinking, chewing, and swallowing, while evacuating and urinating, while walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, walking, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Now here, the Buddha covers it all pretty well, so not leaving us one little moment where we could be unaware. This is how a seeker is present and fully aware. And this does not mean being aware of forcing the awareness on whatever we're doing. This means remembering to let go of any obsessions in the mind, any unwholesome states that could hinder the mind from seeing us clearly at this present moment. It doesn't mean really looking hard where you're going. It means simply making sure that the mind remains clear and wholesome. Of course, looking at where you're going also will help, but you get the idea. This is about the mind. This is about making sure that we're aware of what's going on in the mind. How is a seeker content? One is happy with robes to cover one's body, with alms food to satisfy one's stomach. Wherever one goes, one sets out, taking only these things, just as birds, wherever they fly, take nothing but their wings, and fly with themselves as only burden. Following this entire body of Aryan good conduct, possessing this Aryan mastery of the sense faculties, endowed with Aryan presence and full awareness, attend to this Aryan contentment. Now, when the word Aryan or Arya comes back, this means the Arya Pugalas, anybody that has attained any of the levels of understanding of either stream entry or beyond, but this also means the Aryas at the time of the Buddha were known to be simply the noble ones and noble people. One resorts to a secluded dwelling, to the forest at the root of a tree, on a hillside in some cave, a refuge in the mountain, a forest hut, in the open air on a pile of straw. After having eaten, returning from alms round, one sits down with legs folded and one's body upright. Settling down, and one attends with presence about oneself. And now this is the second part of right effort. This is the letting go of the hindrances, which is the first part of the 6 R's, really. Abandoning longing, dwelling with a mind void of longing for external things. One's mind is cleansed from longing. Abandoning hostility and hatred, one dwells with a mind rid of hostility, with a heartfelt compassion towards all beings that live. One's mind is cleansed from hostility and hatred, leaving behind laziness and dullness of mind, dwelling with a mind void of lazy dullness, perceiving clearly, present and fully aware. One's mind is cleansed from dull laziness. Leaving behind agitation and worry, one dwells uplifted with an inwardly relieved mind. One's mind is cleansed from agitation and worry. Leaving behind perplexity, one dwells unperplexed, rid of uncertainty towards what is good. One's mind is cleansed of perplexity or doubt. Every time we hear this word doubt in terms of either a fetter or a hindrance, it's mainly doubt in the Dhamma, doubt in the teaching, not necessarily other kinds of doubt, like whether you're going to have a coffee or tea this morning. That doesn't really, it's not really what we're talking about here. Just as if someone was in debt, sick, imprisoned in servitude on a wild desert journey. This is how a seeker perceives carrying around these 5 hindrances within oneself. And this is truly how it feels to have these heavy hindrances around with ourselves in our minds, all in everything that we do. And just as if one were freed from debt, freed from illness, freed from jail, freed from slavery, Having come upon the heaven, upon this earth, this is how a seeker perceives the letting go of the 5 hindrances within oneself. Realizing these 5 hindrances have been abandoned, gladness arises. From that gladness, joy arises in the mind. With that joyful mind, the body becomes calm. With a calm body, one experiences happiness, and this happy mind becomes collected. This is a very important part where the Buddha is making it very clear that collectedness of mind is happening through letting go of the hindrances and cultivating joy. This is how the mind becomes collected, not by forcing it onto something. And this sequence comes back quite often in the suttas, but for example, the 12 next suttas in the Digha Nikaya have that same sequence, but it's been abridged even in the Pali, so we don't really hear about it so much, but it is present, and it is present in many other suttas. I called it, well, it is called Dhamma Samadhi in one of the suttas the Buddha talks about. He says that there is this collectedness by the Dhamma, by upholding virtue, abandoning the hindrances, and cultivating. And here also, he's talking about the 7 factors of awakening, of course, that are lining up. But this is a very good practical description of how they work. And he uses that explanation right before entering jhana, meditation. And that's quite interesting. And here we go into the 4 levels of meditation. Letting go of all outwards desires and letting go of unwholesome mental states, still attended by thinking and imagining. The thinking and imagining now are completely wholesome. There's not a trace of anger or impatience or judgment or criticizing. It is simply, for example, you can bring a spiritual friend, that is still possible. You can think of a pleasant situation or something that you love that brings you happiness and joy. But there is no unwholesome thinking or imagination at that point. Still, with the blissful or joyful happiness born of letting go, one understands and abides in the 1st level of meditation. And the Buddha was fairly big on awareness of the body. So now he's talking a bit about awareness of the body, but this is not completely different from other kinds of practice. And you will see, in fact, it only strengthens it. One immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with this joyful happiness born of letting go. And nowhere in one's entire body is left untouched by this blissful happiness born of letting go. Imagine a skilled soap maker who would throw some soap powder into a copper bowl. He would sprinkle it with water and knead it thoroughly. Then, after some time, the lump of soap would be filled and suffused by the moisture, through and through, everywhere touched by the moisture. Yet it would not leak. And this is a wonderful analogy for the mind. Now the mind is starting to have this joyful, collected awareness. And now it's with the body, it is said, but it's not leaking out anymore. And that's what is meant here. And the Buddha had this wonderful way of explaining with these beautiful similes also. In the same way, one immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with this blissful happiness born of letting go. And nowhere in one's entire body is left untouched by this blissful happiness born of letting go. This is a visible fruit of the truth-seeking life, beyond and more exalted than the previous ones. Now we're starting to reap the fruits of the practice. While with the calming of thinking and reflection, with inner tranquilization, one's mind becoming unified, without thinking and reflection, with the joyful happiness born of mental collectedness, one understands and dwells in the second level of meditation. And at this point, we've been maybe cultivating some thoughts, loving thoughts, or wholesome thoughts, or pictures, anything that comes to mind. And the mind, it is the nature of a wholesome mind that is cultivating wholesome state to become collected, because it is happy, it's not flowing outwards anymore. So it just starts to accumulate. And now as we let go, and cultivate in wholesome states, samadhi happens, collectedness. And that becomes a predominant feature in the mind, which is a feature of the second jhana. And at this point, thinking and reflecting become a little coarse. So it tends to the mind tends to simply want that peace. It leans towards that peace. One immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with this blissful happiness born of mental collectedness. And nowhere in one's entire body is left untouched by this blissful happiness born of mental collectedness. And here you can imagine how this wonderful happiness, whether you're practicing the Brahma Viharas or this approach, can only be strengthening your practice, really. Imagine a deep lake with water only welling up from within, with no other source flowing in from the east, the west, the north, or south, with no rain at any time. From that cool water spring gushing up from within. Now this is that joy, this is that happiness that we're cultivating. That lake would become immersed, permeated and suffused and pervaded by this fresh and cool water. And nowhere in this entire lake would be left untouched by this cool spring water. In the same way, one immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with this blissful happiness born of mental collectedness. This is another visible fruit of the truth-seeking life, beyond and more exalted than the previous ones. With the calming of excited joy, one abides in mental steadiness. Sometimes this is misinterpreted. People think that the joy is an awakening factor, so it remains for a very long time. It changes, it becomes more calm, more like bliss. Present and fully aware, experiencing happiness within one's body, a state which the awakened ones describe as steady presence of mind. This is a pleasant abiding. One understands and abides in the third level of meditation. One immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with that happiness beyond excited joy. And nowhere in one's entire body is left untouched by this happiness beyond excited joy. Imagine water lilies, Indian lotuses, and white lotuses. Some of these water lilies and lotuses are born in the water, grown in the water, not risen above the water. nourished while completely immersed. From their very tip down to their roots, submerged, permeated, suffused, and pervaded by this cool water, so that no part of those water lilies, Indian lotuses, or white lotuses is left untouched by this cool water. In the same way, one immerses, permeates, suffuses, and pervades one's body with that happiness beyond excited joy. This is a visible fruit of the truth-seeking life, beyond and more exalted than the previous ones. Now, this calmer happiness is, in fact, much better. The mind is taking a lot of happy rest in it, leaving behind the notion of happiness and unhappiness, with the settling of mental gladness and disturbance, with neither pain nor pleasure, purified by unmoving presence. One understands and abides in the fourth level of meditation. One sits with one's body suffused with this bright purity of one's own spotless mind. And nowhere in one's body is left untouched by this purity of one's own spotless mind. Imagine a man or a woman was sitting wrapped up to the head with a sparkling white cloth, so that nowhere on their entire body would be left untouched by this sparkling white cloth. This is that bright purity of awareness at this point. In the same way, one sits with one's body fused with that bright purity of one's own spotless mind. And nowhere in one's entire body is left untouched by this bright purity. This is yet another fruit of the truth-seeking life, beyond this and more exalted than the previous ones. And this is getting only better and better and better. And with the metta here, if you're practicing the Brahma Viharas, the metta is still, it becomes very steady, very, very steady, but very calm also. It requires very little effort, very little input, or simply a little kindling, little bit. And it is very easy to support, easy to maintain, and it's very steady. Like it's barely there anymore, but it is still. And now the training in discernment. And of course, this whole path begins with discernment and ends with discernment. Sometimes this is called wisdom. I call it discernment, panya, because it is discerning between states. It is telling states apart that are wholesome and that are unwholesome. Of course, we've been doing this whole time, but there is also the ultimate discernment that is the end goal of the path also. And this is put in that way here. With this composed and collected mind, wholly cleansed and purified, clear and open, rid of imperfections, having become soft and malleable, straight and unwavering, one directs and inclines one's mind to the complete calming of the mental movements. One understands the mental movements as they really are, yatha bhutam, seeing things as they really are. This is tension. This is the increase of tension. This is the release from tension. This is how to relax the tension. Of course, these are the Four Noble Truths, and of course, these are usually translated as suffering, but I find this tension to be a little bit more practical for us in our direct practice, because not everything is suffering all the time. And in fact, at that point, the mind is very happy, and we really learn to see these states as bringer of tension. And that's all. We're not like banging our heads on the walls of something. We're not suffering. We're simply noticing these tensions that are coming up and releasing them. And we're noticing that these distractions, these movements of the mind, these asavas, well, they are bringing just slight little tension at this point, and we are doing much better, much happier without these movements. The mind takes delight in untangling itself. One understands the mental movements as they really are. These are the mental movements. These are the increase. This is the increase of the mental movements. This is the release from the mental movements. This is how to release the mental movements. Of course, the fourth one is usually said this is the path. And it is the path. The Eightfold Path is the path. And this is the how here. It is simply put in a different way a little bit. And these mental movements simply are distractions. All these things that the mind has accumulated. We have this nice bank of things to get distracted with. And so continually observing and understanding in this way, one's mind is released from the inclination of clinging outwardly, from the inclination to projecting in the future, from the inclination to negligence. In that release, one knows this is release. One directly knows unwholesome states have been overcome, or birth of action. Lived is the spiritual life, done is what should be done. There is no more conceit here. This is yet another visible fruit of the truth-seeking life. And in regards to the fruits of the truth-seeking life, great king, there are none beyond this or more exalted than this. Once this was spoken, the king Ajatasattu of Magadha exclaimed, "Excellent, Bhante, excellent," just as if what had fallen over been set up right, or as what had been hidden was uncovered, or as if the way was shown to someone who was lost, or as if light was shone in the darkness, thinking, "Let those with vision see." In the same way, Bhante, the awakened one, has brought forth, elucidated the Dhamma in countless ways. Bhante, I go to the awakened one as a refuge to the Dhamma and the Bhikkhu Sangha. May the awakened one count me as a lay follower from now on who has gone for refuge for life. And this is how it ends here on this beautiful sutta on explaining the fruits of this wonderful practice and how the Buddha wonderfully explained his path and using these wonderful examples and similes and bright analogies. So I hope you enjoyed this little sutta here. I find there's very few people like the Buddha to explain his own path, so I'm not gonna try to make it better here. So, are there any questions?
What is the name of the sutta again? The number again?
This is the second of the Digha Nikaya, of the long discourses. In the wisdom publication, this is the fruits of the homeless life. Yes, yes, we have someone here showing the book exactly. But this is my own translation, so it's exactly the same.
The translation itself is like a little bit different but very modern. It's really nice, and I attached that in our group invite. So if you don't have it, you want it, please let me know. I will distribute it. Bhante has quite a bit of beautiful translations. So if any one of you interested, please let me know. I'll give you the links as well.
You can send them. Hi, Bhante. Sister Kema. I really liked your translation. It was very, very nice. And I caught something in there that I was surprised, but I always like to find it, Upanisa Sutta, you know that one? Upanisa.
Yes.
You know the line, you took the line, the Pamoja, the Piti, the Pasadi, and the Sukha, and you used it exactly the same. I like to find that over and over again in the suttas. It was special. It's good.
Yes.
Really nice.
Yes. The wonderful sequence.
Yeah, it was really nice. I liked it. You cut it down. I was following it. You can follow it in Maurice's book. In Maurice Walsh's book, the Digha Nikaya. I could keep up with you, but yeah, you cut it down just right. It was really nice.
Good. Yes, that's one of the part that is in fact abridged even in the Pali. In the next 11 suttas in the Digha Nikaya, they all have that sequence. They all have this really beautiful sequence.
You can discover it when you're practicing Twim. You can see it. That's what's so much fun. You can actually see it as clearly as Sariputta did in Anupada Sutta. Yeah, you can. Really good.
Well, I wish the best for all of you, and may all the blessings be with you, and perhaps we can share our merits, and
Okay.
may suffering ones be suffering. May the good
may all beings find relief.
may all beings
We have thus acquired for the
acquisition
of happiness.
may beings inhabiting Devas and Nagas, my
May this merit of ours. May the long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Thank you, everyone.